So he doesn't mention which drugs that he actually believes that nandrolone is competing with, but if I had to guess, in my What is up, YouTube, and welcome back to my channel. My name is Elon Muscular, and in this video we're going to be watching and reacting to a video posted by Andreas Cahling. Okay, this guy is a legend. If you've ever seen the memes of Arnold where it's like how he looks today, it's actually commonly Arnold's head photoshopped on this guy's body. He was a golden era bodybuilder from the 70s. He competed all through the 70s, 80s, 90s. He even did competitions recently. Nowadays, he's in his 60s or early 70s, and he's still passionate about bodybuilding, and he's still putting out relevant information to help younger guys coming up understand, the secrets that they had back from the golden era. So let's jump right into this video, and I will comment on the things that he says, maybe fact check him a little bit, and we can see what we can learn from this old school legend.
I'm here today to talk about a subject I get asked about a lot, and very few people really know anything about it, because they sure weren't there. And it is the use of anabolic steroids during the bodybuilding golden era. Not all bodybuilders use steroids, but a lot of bodybuilders did. So what's the straight dope on what's going on there? Well, I have made myself a few notes here, so I will start.
He kind of looks like me, don't you think?
There are many different kinds of steroids, and some are good for you and some are bad for you. And many fall somewhere in between good and bad, since some anabolic steroids like nandrolone also have tremendous healing properties for immune suppressed people and many other medical conditions as well. So why do steroids fall out of favor?
So I think it's important to know what he says. Some steroids are good for you, some steroids are bad for you. And I think this is an important distinction to make because, since anabolic steroids became illegal and we have all these studies and stuff like that, and in the mainstream, a lot of people think that just because it, is a sex steroid or derived from testosterone, that it's bad for human health. But these drugs were initially invented as medicine for certain reasons, namely muscle wasting, and over time they found that they have helped with a lot of different things, such as healing from burns, healing from injuries, people with AIDS that are having debilitating breakdown of their body. So anabolic steroids are building hormones that can actually help human health down the line as long as they're used correctly and understood and not abused.
Was it because they were very dangerous, or was it more a patent technical question and the reasons political and economic when their patents expired? You think about that one. When talking about anabolic steroids, we usually refer to synthetic derivatives of testosterone.
So it's important to note here that, while Andreas Kahling was coming up, anabolic steroids were actually legal, and they were widely available and easily prescribed by a doctor. A 16-year-old and 18-year-old could go into the doctor's office and say, hey, I'm looking to put on additional muscle mass, and the doctor would prescribe them D-bol pills. So I think that is very important to know. So he comes from a background of seeing these things, be legal, be freely prescribed, and then in '89 they're made illegal and suddenly they're of the devil. But these guys, these bodybuilders who had experimented with these things and were experimenting with these things, they already knew the truth about anabolic steroids. They knew that they weren't that dangerous. They knew that they enhanced athletic performance, which the powers that be were also trying to deny. So it goes to show, and he starts thinking, why did they legalize these things? Is it because they actually have so many health benefits that pharmaceutical companies don't want people using testosterone replacement therapy, using decadurabolin and growth hormone to heal themselves when they've suffered injuries, and instead they can prescribe them, painkillers or other sorts of medicine that just masks the symptoms of the issue, as opposed to, internally inside of the body and hormonally helping the body heal and resolve the issue.
Testosterone is a highly androgenic natural anabolic steroid hormone, which in its biological state or form is not patentable, since you cannot get a patent on a natural substance. This makes bioidentical testosterone a not very profitable pharmaceutical product. The synthetic anabolic steroids were tweaked to be more anabolic and less androgenic. The most common anabolic steroid during the golden era was D-bol made by Ciba.
So when he says that the steroids are tweaked to be more anabolic and less androgenic, what he means is that, testosterone is a 1-to-1 anabolic to androgenic. Just as well as it builds muscle, it also gives secondary sex characteristics. Anabolic is going to be muscle building. Androgenic is going to be, making guys bald if they're predisposed to it, hair growth, deepening of the voice, and all those kind of different things. So testosterone does both of these things in equal ratios, as well as we understand as humans, because that is our natural hormone. So all these other steroids were created to try to take away the masculinizing effects of testosterone and add an anabolic effect. So basically, SARMs and why they're so sexy to people now, that is why they created all of these derivatives of testosterone in the first place. D-bol, DECA, these are all spin-offs of the testosterone molecule to try to get more of what we want and less of what we don't necessarily need.
Ciba blue little pills, which are way more potent than the black market Dianabol some people use today. Dianabol was first used by Russian weightlifters in the 50s, and by American weightlifters in the 60s. I first learned about Dianabol back in 1969 from Olympic weightlifters back in Sweden. Dianabol was sold in the Swedish pharmacies without a prescription, and few people knew about it back then. People using Dianabol usually took between 2 and 5 or 6 5-milligram pills, but higher doses were used by some. Nosebleeds and water retention were the most common side effects. An injectable version also appeared at some point.
So I know that, UGL, there is injectable D-bol, but I didn't know that pharmaceutically there was injectable D-bol. So maybe something that could use further looking into. Now, in terms of dosages, he talks about how they're 5-milligram pills, and we saw that same thing in the Rick Drayson video. And, they both were getting them from Ciba. So this was the D-bol manufacturer at the time. And 2 to 5 to 6 pills means anywhere from 10 milligrams to 25 to 30 milligrams. And he also says some people took more. So nowadays we know that some guys take, 50 milligrams, 100 milligrams of D-bol. And it was no different back then. The only difference is that now, if you go to an underground source and try to get D-bol, it's probably in a 25 milligrams or 50 milligram pill. So it's harder to get a lower dose, I guess, if you are looking to take a lower dose than it actually was back then. So I think the dosages of it being in 5-milligram pills, so that you have to take like 10 pills to get 50 milligrams, really does discourage abuse in a sense, because you'd have to be knowingly abusing something in order to take 10 pills of it, whereas nowadays if it's sold in a 25 milligram pill, it's a lot easier to take 2 of those, psychologically speaking.
Other oral anabolic steroids used were maxibolan, Anawar, and Anadrol 50. Anawar and maxibolan were mild, and Anadrol 50 was strong.
So maxibolan is something that definitely deserves more research into, and something that I'm planning to make another video about to, talk about the history of maxibolan and how it was used. But that is not something that, we use today. It's not something that you ever hear about in modern times. So it's interesting to think that they had steroids back then that we actually don't have now.
And considered toxic. Anadrol 50 later appeared as an injectable black market drug. Another oral with a well-deserved bad reputation was oral methyl testosterone, which is very toxic. Most common injectables were nandrolone, which came as either decadurabolin or durabolin, which is supposed to be a faster acting version. Nandrolone has tremendous potential for healing, but is almost a taboo subject since nandrolone competes with so many patentable drugs with fresh patents, making nandrolone unsuitable for profit maximizing all pharmaceutical sales.
So he doesn't mention which drugs that he actually believes that nandrolone is competing with, but if I had to guess, in my experience, nandrolone has incredible effects for healing joints specifically. I had a lot of issues with my rotator cuffs for a long time. When I was natural, I think about 21 years old, I was, regularly bench pressing anywhere between 250 and 300 pounds. And my rotator cuffs started to be completely worn out because I was not doing any rotator cuff warm-ups and I was not doing any rotator cuff exercises, which I know to do now. And my rotator cuffs were always fucked up until I added nandrolone as well as growth hormone into my, protocols. It completely healed them. So if you think about sports injuries and the use of nandrolone, it is really one of the best things in terms of helping people heal from sports injuries. But, these pharmaceutical companies would rather have people taking anti-inflammatory drugs and painkillers or cortisone shots as opposed to prescribing them nandrolone. So I think that's probably what he's talking about here.
Side effect of nandrolone is decreased sex drive and is therefore usually used with testosterone to counteract that.
So there's this common myth of deca dick, right? If you take nandrolone, your sex drive is going to go down. Now, I think it's important to note, and a lot of these golden era guys say this, is that, they took 2, 3, maybe 4 cc's of nandrolone. It was 100 milligrams per milliliter a week. So if you do that standalone, the problem is that nandrolone does not convert to estrogen as much as testosterone does. And estrogen is largely responsible for your actual ability to get an erection and to have a normal sex drive. Whereas obviously too much estrogen is going to go the other way, and too little estrogen is going to also have a negative effect there. So when you just take nandrolone on its own, if you don't take enough of it, and not enough converts to estrogen, which I think the common understanding is that it converts about 5 times less. So if you would need 100 milligrams of testosterone to maintain your sexual function, then you would need 500 milligrams nandrolone, give or take, to kind of have that same sexual benefit. So when you're taking 100 milligrams of nandrolone, that would be like taking 20 milligrams of testosterone in terms of estrogen conversion, which obviously would not be a lot and probably might make a lot of guys' sex drive go down. So that is my theory with the deca dick, that people either take too little deca without any testosterone or too much deca and testosterone, that causing either too low of estrogen or too high of estrogen. It's not actually the decadurabolin in itself that has any sort of mechanism that causes you to have erectile dysfunction. It's kind of like the downstream effects of it. So when he talks about, mixing a small amount of testosterone with the deca, you can think about it like if you take 1 cc of each, so let's say 250 test 250 deca, right? Then the testosterone will give you enough estrogen, and then the deca won't overload anything there. So you'll have a healthy, good mix and be able to have high sex drive while still getting the benefits of both.
Thyroid came as 50 and 100 milligram, while decadurabolin came as 100 or 200 milligram. Doses used varied, but worst side effect of higher doses seemed to be sleepiness.
So the sleepiness, again, you can see that the reason why that might happen is because when you take DECA, it shuts down your natural testosterone. You need testosterone for energy. So if you don't replace the testosterone that you have over time, you might have less energy. That would be my theory on that.
Primobolan was another staple item among some competitors, the most desirable coming from Schering in Germany. It came in two versions, regular primobolan and a highly desired and treasured by some, primobolan acetate, which was supposed to be a faster acting. I think that was 20 milligrams only a dose, while the regular primobolan came in 100 milligram glass vials. The primobolan acetate was a competition drug primarily, used towards the closer to the competitions. Primobolan also came as an oral steroid that was less in demand than injectable primobolan versions. Parabolan, nowadays.
So, just briefly about the primobolan, since he touched on it, obviously we know that, primobolan is coming through Germany, through the Arnold Schwarzenegger connection-ish. That's the theory, right? Well, we can say pretty much it's been corroborated enough times to assume that Arnold Schwarzenegger was responsible for the importing of primobolan into the United States for bodybuilders in some degree, right? And I think it's important to note that primobolan, it's a great performance enhancer, and it really helps get that cosmetic look for bodybuilding that a lot of guys had at the time. Pump up the muscles, increase nitrogen retention, less water retention beneath the muscle and the skin. So primobolan is the bodybuilder's hormone, right? That is what it's best for. So obviously the best bodybuilder in the world at the time had the best access to it. We know how this game works, right? So that's kind of it about primobolan. The issue with primobolan today is that it's so hard to get legitimate primobolan, especially in a price that people can afford. So when back then he had this really great connection, and it changed the way that people look. I think it's important to understand the kind of socioeconomic and availability and legality of things when you look at the physiques, because they have an impact. So if these guys had an unlimited supply of high quality primobolan, it's going to be a completely different look than guys today who are relying mostly on, really high dosages of underground labs testosterone. It's just going to create a different look to the muscle and a different look to the physiques.
Often referred to as trenbolone, had a following but was avoided or used more cautiously by some due to its rumored toxicity.
So parabolan, the original trenbolone, was coming out of France. It was on the market for a few years, I think, to help with the same type of thing, muscle wasting diseases. It came in 76.5 milligram ampules, and it was pretty widely used heading up to competitions. People eventually started to notice that the effects of parabolan were unlike anything that they have ever seen before. And there's actually a picture of Arnold, and what we believe that he was running a parabolan cycle, so an early tren cycle. Now, parabolan is actually trenbolone, hexo, whatever, carbonate. It's not acetate or an enthate. It's even longer acting. But people still did 2 to 3 shots of parabolan a week leading up to contests.
A very rare and little known steroid was esiclene. The only steroid which could make muscles grow instantly but temporarily. Developed for eye surgery to make eye bigger and easier to operate on, bodybuilders surely had an eye for it too.
So I'm not sure if it's right to classify esiclene as a steroid because from what I understand, it was not a sex steroid. I don't know too much about it, but I have heard some, anecdotal reports of people taking this pre-contest in order to cause local inflammation in their muscles. So for example, if I want a bigger bicep and then I put esiclene in my bicep, right? And then it blows up. And then when I get on stage, I have bigger biceps. So you could think of it like a synthol, but temporary and something that people use right before the show to have that local inflammation to look bigger on stage.
Thyroid hormones were used by some before competitions and also as part of a hormone replacement program, since one of the main bodybuilding doctors at the time of the golden era felt most people were too low and benefited from natural thyroid replacement therapy. Synthetic thyroid medications were more used than natural thyroid medications. Some bodybuilders also used iodine to support their thyroid function. Thiomucase cream and subcutaneous injections were.
So thyroid hormones, obviously this is something that came into play. He says one of the doctors thought people had too low thyroid. Well, a lot of the times when you get into a very low calorie diet for a long time, your thyroid will down regulate. Your thyroid regulates your metabolism basically. So after you've been eating calories for a long time, it's not uncommon that people's thyroid levels will be low because their body's trying to preserve energy and stop itself from burning additional body fat because it's trying to say that, hey, we don't need any less body fat than we already have, and we want to switch up our metabolism and slow it down because you're getting too lean basically. So just by replacing your thyroid to the normal levels of what you would have when you have a healthy metabolism, you can burn way more fat when you get to those lower body fat ranges. Now, if you already have a healthy metabolism and are eating a good amount of calories, you wouldn't need additional thyroid hormones. It wouldn't help you at all. But again, when you're deep into a diet and your thyroid levels are going low, it might help to synthetically bring it back to normal for that short period of time, just to make sure that you don't have that fat loss plateau that your body is trying to, regulate its systems to create.
Were used by some for what was believed to be a tighter skin, popularized by a famous French pro bodybuilder of the time. Another such subcutaneous injectable drug was called Ydace, but its benefits doubtful, for that purpose at least. Amphetamines were common in the form of legally prescribed so-called diet pills, and pain pills were used by many as well.
So when you look at the history of drugs, it's important to understand that, back in the day, they were much more liberal. Well, I don't know if it's fair to say that, but they were liberal with prescribing things, right? So if you say to the doctor, I don't have a lot of energy, they would give you amphetamines. If you say I'm in pain, they give you painkillers. I mean, I know a lot of these things still stand, but I think today it's harder to get prescriptions for stuff unless you're going with particularly a crooked doctor. But back in the day, it was like the doctors were there to prescribe these things were new, and maybe the long-term side effects of them weren't completely studied yet. So from what I understand, based on a lot of these stories, people would shop around, and basically going to the doctor and the pharmacy was like, if you had a drug problem, you could pretty much get whatever you want if you had a drug problem and enough money. So a lot of these bodybuilders, of course, were not averse to doing drugs, and it is not uncommon that a lot of them would get into amphetamines and painkillers. We know from pro wrestlers how prevalent this was around Hollywood, where a lot of these guys lived, obviously on Venice Beach. So I mean, that definitely was a part of bodybuilding. That is something that actually is very good, that nowadays I don't see that being such a big part of bodybuilding, and bodybuilders are more hardcore now and very much against the use of recreational drugs, which I agree with, because I think that using recreational drugs or pharmaceutical drugs such as painkillers, amphetamines, and stuff like that, and mixing that with anabolic steroids, you're creating a cocktail of drugs that can actually be very negatively impactful on your health, namely on your liver in terms of the painkillers and your heart in terms of the amphetamines.
Coffee was, of course, a must. And most California pro bodybuilders used marijuana for stimulating appetite, relax, or as a pre-workout, even sometimes a during workout.
So there's obviously that famous picture of Arnold smoking weed. Marijuana is something that has been used a lot in bodybuilding. I like to use THC and CBD now. You can check out my CBD sponsor, Cultivate Life. These guys have really, really great CBD that I use every single day. Helps me calm down, helps me go to sleep, helps with inflammation post-workout. And obviously CBD is something that is active in the marijuana plant, right? When you smoke it, you're getting THC and CBD. So it is not confusing to see how, cannabis could actually help people who are athletes and have performance enhancing benefits on the back end in terms of the fact that it helps them get out of that adrenalinized state that they're in while they're working, training, drinking caffeine, taking amphetamines, all this stuff. Taking marijuana is a healthier way to calm down, get your body into that relaxed state, ready to absorb nutrients. It increases your appetite so you can eat more to put on more muscle. And I think overall it is just a very useful thing in bodybuilding.
There were rumors in the 70s about the monkey growth hormone in use, but I never knew if this was true. True growth hormone arrived on the scene in the late 70s and early 80s in the form of bioidentical growth hormone made from human cadavers.
So I think this is very important to note, when you think about growth hormone in bodybuilding, what a lot of people think of is, American pharmaceutical 191 amino acid recombinant HGH made in a lab, right? And that was available in the 90s and 2000s. So when a lot of people look at these golden era physiques in the late 70s, early 80s, they don't think that growth hormone was a part of that equation. So the question becomes, is growth hormone necessary to build a classic physique? Well, what is known and what is being told in this video is that actually they did have access to growth hormone. It was cadaver growth hormone, so it was from actual human cadavers that they synthesized the growth hormone from their glands after they passed away. Kind of gross, and they found that this kind of growth hormone was having a lot more side effects and discontinued it in order to make the growth hormone that we have today. But to think that a lot of these guys weren't taking growth hormone, it's not true, because it was available, and the ones who were willing to experiment were experimenting.
Then, just in time for the LA Olympics, came the synthetic Swedish growth hormone from Cobby Vitro, which revolutionized the world of sports and also coincided with the golden era of Swedish track and field. One of my doctors, Dr. Robert Kerr, rest in peace, doctor.
So we mentioned this guy in the last video with Rick Drayson, and Dr. Robert Kerr was the premier, the original guru, the original enhanced coach. He had all these bodybuilders in the golden era guys. He was in the growth hormone scene. He was in the Olympic scene, and he was writing protocols for and prescribing to all these famous athletes what they used in order to enhance their performance. So very interesting guy, someone that we don't know a ton about.
Prescribed growth hormone to many athletes competing in the LA Olympics. And no test could reveal if an athlete used the synthetic growth hormone or not. There was no risk of getting caught, and it could legally be obtained from a doctor. So what was the most dangerous drug used during the golden era of bodybuilding? The drug which was most dangerous was probably lasix, which is a powerful diuretic with the capacity of knocking the biggest bodybuilder down for good. Of course, alcohol, cigarettes, heroin, cocaine, quaaludes, junk food, and more took a toll on many bodybuilders as well, who succumbed to cross-addicted lifestyles.
So lasix is a diuretic that bodybuilders take before a competition. The purpose of the diuretic is to flush water out of the body. So when you take lasix, you start to excrete like all the water, and the point is that you look dry when you get up on stage. But the problem with that is that, you're forcing your body to an extreme state of dehydration, which obviously affects a lot of the, functions in the body, especially the kidneys, and can have a detrimental effect to the extreme. There were bodybuilders who literally died on competition day because they were abusing diuretics and didn't understand how to use them properly. So much so that the IFBB decided to put in diuretic testing at some point to try to stop this from happening, but ultimately, I don't know, it just didn't work out. They didn't have the funds or the ability to be able to test for these diuretics, and it's still something that people use today. People use diuretics nowadays, even at local shows. It's a commonly used thing. So it is extremely dangerous, and it can kill somebody if they don't know what they're doing properly, because basically you are driving yourself into a state where this is the opposite of what you need. What you need is food and hydration when you're about to get on stage at a bodybuilding competition, and what you're doing is taking a diuretic to further dehydrate you chemically. So it's crazy. And also what he's talking about, cigarettes, junk food, recreational drugs, steroids, anabolic steroids will amplify everything that you're doing to your body. So I try to advocate to be as healthy as possible. If you're going to go down this route, you want to be doing everything to a way higher level than the average person would in order to maintain your health. So if you're taking steroids and eating cheeseburgers and eating unhealthy, being overweight, smoking cigarettes, taking recreational drugs, you're going to speed up the process of your death. Like, this is an acceleration of your death. But if you do things way healthier, and the average person is doing this stuff, they are taking recreational drugs, they are drinking, they're smoking cigarettes, they are, doing all this stuff, and you're taking steroids but living a super healthy lifestyle, I think that you can actually outlive them, assuming that you're not taking crazy amounts of stuff that is like causing extremely toxic reactions and inflammation in your body. So if you can reduce the inflammation in other ways, then I think that you can be healthy and be enhanced at the same time. And that's the goal with this channel. But if you're going to just throw the kitchen sink at it and cause your body to have all this inflammation, of course, you are going to succumb. Eventually, something is going to break. And that is what Andreas Kahling knows, because, he's been around a long time. He's been in great shape for a long time. I'm sure he's seen a lot of the guys that he trained with have heart attacks or pass away from other reasons in his time. He's in his 60s already. So if you want to be doing this when you're in your 60s, I do. I still want to be in good shape and still be able to do the things that I want to do, not be completely busted up in a wheelchair, with a post-heart attack at 62 years old. It's important to take control of your health for the long term.
It seems that bodybuilders who used anabolic steroids therefore permanently might have lowered their own production of testosterone. And without getting on a testosterone hormone replacement program, suffered the worst side effects of steroid use. Extended periods of low testosterone can be a deadly affliction. If you fall into this category, get help ASAP.
So I completely agree with what Andreas is saying here. This is extremely important to note, okay? If you're gonna fuck around with these things, if you're gonna fuck around with steroids, if you're gonna fuck around with SARMs, you're going to permanently lower your testosterone production and permanently have a negative impact on your health. If you are going to use these things, then you need to be ready to be taking testosterone replacement therapy for life. You're going to be like Andreas Kahling in his 60s, and he's still taking his testosterone shots just like he was when he was 24 years old, right? This is the truth. This is reality. This is every week, or maybe you can skip a week, but at least every 2 weeks for the rest of your days on this planet. So if you're thinking about going down this path, take it from, you don't have to take it from me. I'm, a young guy. Take it from this guy. He knows what's up. This is the game. You want to play the game? You got to play by the rules. And these are the rules. You take this shit. There's no shortcuts. You're permanently changing your body, permanently changing your physiology. And if you're going to come off, not get tested, not PCT properly, and live with low testosterone for the rest of your life, you're going to have a miserable life. So once you go down this enhanced path, you're living the enhanced life.
By finding a doctor who specializes in non-patentable bioidentical testosterone replacement therapy. It comes from a compounding pharmacy in the form of an additive-free testosterone cream with a plant extract chrysin included, which is a mild anti-aromatase inhibitor, blocking most of the conversion of the testosterone to estrogen, that means. And you simply rub it in.
Okay, so now we're talking about that. Well, he likes the cream. Most guys nowadays take the shots, but he's from a different era. Maybe he likes the cream. Anyway, I hope you guys like this video. We learned a lot from this video. I hope you learned a lot from Andreas. He is a wealth of knowledge. I would love to get him on the podcast or react to more of his videos and be able to take in more information from him. If you want to see more information from me, don't forget to subscribe to the channel. Click the notification bell so you know when new videos come out. Like this video, comment the video, check out the Bodybuilding Lifestyle podcast, where I have open conversations just like this with guys who are out there doing it today and have the most cutting edge science and research. And make sure that you check out Shredded Secrets of Fitness Influencers, which is my full mini course on how to enhance yourself to lose fat or just do it naturally as well. We talk about that too, to get shredded for summer. If you like this video, thanks so much for watching. Peace.